came and I had to learn computers like on the fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's always the other half of the year, right? Yeah.
I don't know. I can't give it up yet. Not quite yet.
No?
I'm just not there yet.
Maybe for Lent. Maybe we
Maybe.
come back to it in Lent.
Hey, that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah, there you go. There
Right.
you go.
I tried giving up coffee once for Lent.
That didn't work either.
No. I thought I was having like a stroke. My brain was hurting so bad. I was just like, this cannot be coffee. So I've never been on coffee ever again to that degree. Just have one cup a day.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that's all I do.
Yeah.
Speaking of coffee,
Yes.
maybe someone watching right now is drinking coffee because we are live. Welcome to our Grow Fall Sessions.
Hello.
This is Monica.
Hi.
And I'm Luke. I'm on our pastoral team here, and we're so glad that you're joining us. If you're joining us live, welcome. Maybe you're joining us later. Also, if you're watching this at a later date, welcome to you. Before Monica and I have a conversation, and our conversation tonight is going to be about physical health and the pandemic, let me just give a little bit of context to what this is if you're new or you're newer, and maybe some insight into how you can engage tonight. Our Grow sessions are places where we can explore different topics that are important in our church and in our community. And through the fall, we have been focusing on the topic of health. Last week, for example, we sat down with my friend Matt, and we talked about mental health and the pandemic. They said Monica and I are going to talk about physical health and the pandemic. Later, we're going to talk about community in the pandemic and rest in the pandemic. It's probably important, and maybe this goes without saying, that all these components obviously work in together, which we're probably going to talk a little bit more about later. But today we're going to talk a bit about physical health and how that comes into play into our persons as interconnected beings. So Monica is going to tell her more about herself in just a moment, but let me give you some insight into how you can interact if you're viewing with us live. And how you can do that is just here on YouTube Live. There is the comment section, and if you have a question throughout our conversation, please feel free to type it. And my hope will be to keep an eye on that, and we'll kind of answer the questions as they come up. It's said often, but I think we can say it again. There's no stupid questions, right?
Right.
That sounds good to you?
No such thing as a stupid question.
No such thing. So please ask your question, and we'll do our best to address it as we go through. With that, we're going to talk about physical health in the pandemic. But Monica, we've known each other for, well, how long have you guys been a part of the church now?
We started coming here when Maya was 5 months. She's now 10 years old. It's been a while.
I was thinking the other night, I was like, I think it's 10 years for them.
Right.
And so you've gone mom style and said, okay, how old's my youngest child?
I remember it because she was 5 months, and on our first day that she was here, she got stung by a bee on her way out the door.
Oh,
so
I'm glad that you came back after that.
I remember being like, is she allergic to bees? And we were kind of freaking out, but we were also, she's our baby. So, and we were well-seasoned parents. We weren't freaking out all that much. And yeah. I just remember that being like, oh, she got her first bee sting at 5 months old.
There you go.
Right.
Her badge of honor at Living Water.
Right. And that's why I remember she was 5 months.
That's amazing. Right. Okay. So that's seared in your, that makes sense. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. I'm Monica. I'm a personal trainer. I'm a body image activist and a wellness coach. Yeah. I have 3 kiddos and an adopted nephew son who is now 26. I've been married for, Greg, are we going on 21? 21 years?
21 years.
21
Snaps
years.
For 21
I
years.
know, right? Yeah, what else could I tell you? I love running. I love everything outside. If it's outside, I'm in. Love art, love music, good coffee and reading.
We were talking earlier about reading. How many books do you have on the go right now?
Probably about 8 or 9 books going on right now. Yeah. I am a pretty hardcore reader.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Is there ever any way you can combine the running and the hiking with the reading other than listening to it?
Actually, I don't listen to read. I never do. No, I like paper books.
Yeah, me too.
I think for me, I'm kind of like moving or completely chilling.
Right.
I'm like extremes almost.
I can resonate with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm either go, moving, or I am like flat on the couch with a nice glass of wine, some classical music, my book, like, or else I'm listening to like crazy music or no music and going for a long run.
Yeah. It's either 60 or 0.
It seems to be like that for me.
That makes
and that
sense.
seems like good balance for me. Works for me.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're a personal trainer, you're a body activist.
Yes.
You're a wellness coach. And here we are in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
You're an expert in the physical body and how we can love our bodies and express our bodies and those sorts of things. What has this been like for you?
Well, it's been an interesting, almost like a second pandemic for our family, to say. So it's been interesting kind of walking through the COVID-19 experience. And it seems like we have a community of people now walking through similar circumstances of a lot of unknowns, a lot of solid answers. There is no solid answer. There is no for sure's, and kind of almost being kind of now in a community of people, a whole world of people that are navigating the land of the unknowns. And I mean, to give you a further, you know this, but I'm sure some of our viewers may not, just I have a type of cancer that is not, it's very rare. There is no cure. It is terminal. Once it activates, it is in its inactive state. So there are so many of these sorts of things. There's no answers. There's no treatments. There's no whens for sure. So we've had to live in this land for the last 3 years since the original diagnosis of, okay, this is what this is. So yeah, learning how to live in a world of no solid answers, which isn't that an illusion anyways?
Yeah.
Right. We like to believe.
We can pretend we have control.
Right.
Yeah.
When we don't actually. Right. So it's kind of this awareness that COVID has given us. I don't know how what was the question again?
It was, what's this been like for you? What I heard you say is, well, we kind of were living in this strange state before then.
Right.
So what about the 3-year journey with cancer that you've been having? What did you carry into COVID as a resource or a tool?
One big thing is surrender. All your expectations, even surrendering some of your dreams, your plans, right? My plans for September 2020 are definitely not what I had thought they would be the beginning of January when I was planning out the year. So learning to be adapting to situations, open to flexibility, releasing, grieving, letting things go. Right.
So in terms of like, I don't know, we're going to talk about the interconnectedness of the human person and the body and all that. But in terms of your emphasis on kind of physical health and such, like what has that been like in the pandemic for you personally? Like what have you had to grieve? What have you had to shift and adapt to? What's that been like for you?
I feel like for the pandemic, it wasn't a huge shock for our family because we've had to adjust so much to like just accepting our own circumstances. I think I had to shift a lot work-wise.
Okay.
Business-wise, I was like, goodness gracious, pivoting and learning computers, and computers are so not my thing. So having to really learn that. I feel like for our family, kind of slowing down is sort of our lifestyle. So I know that for a lot of people, either the COVID-19 pandemic, they've become like, they don't have activities to go to or things to do or people to see because they're more of a go kind of family or person. And in our case, we're kind of not that family. We're kind of the slower family where we do the hammock lifestyle pretty good. So slowing down with the pandemic was kind of a relief from, we're not busy to begin with, but it felt nice not to even need to do stuff.
Everyone's catching up to us.
Right. It felt like it did actually. That's probably what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Is that in a large way, the simple life is sort of something that we've really done. And I think a large part of that is because of the way our family has to live with this kind of the awareness that life is terminal. And so slowing down and just taking it all in and really savoring the moments and just enjoying each other and your friends and our neighbors is sort of the way we do life. But on the flip side, our work life became incredibly busy. So that was the challenge for us with COVID. Not so much the like, this scary thing that's out there and it can, be very frightening to many people. We've had to deal with that 3 years ago, right? Because hearing you have terminal disease is very scary, and that there's no cure, that's scary. So I understand and empathize with people's fear of COVID, but I think what we could relate to, or what I could relate to, would be the busyness of our work life just became, whoa, we got to figure this out like right now. And and then having 3 kids and running a business, 3 kids in 4 schools. So that's really? Right, because Ty does 2 schools.
Right.
So it was a little nuts for a bit there.
Yeah.
So that part was hard. And for me to maintain, being healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, lots of different things that I do.
Yeah. So with the people that you work with as a wellness coach and as a personal trainer, what have you noticed? Like, how are people responding to the pandemic when it comes to how they relate to their bodies and how health is important, or maybe less so for them? Like, what have you been noticing and hearing from people that you speak with?
I know that mental wellness is super important right now. And I think that most of my clients and people that I work with overwhelm and anxiety and fear, lack of feeling like they have a lack of control of the circumstances. And I think that as a personal trainer, teaching people that there are some things that are within our control, and being able to use them to help relieve some of the stress and the overwhelm and the anxiety. It's not a cure. It's not gonna take it all away and make everything better, but it's certainly a great way to release some of the good hormones in our bodies that really help us feel mentally like, okay, I can deal with this one day at a time, right? So
So if I were to sit down with you now, and let's say I'm a client, so maybe this is my free session, I don't know, but and I go, Monica, I just feel overwhelmed, I feel anxious, I feel stressed, I feel like it's just been the worst number of months. Like, physically, I can feel it in my body. I'm not sleeping. Like, if I were to share that kind of with you, I'm at that kind of ramped up place or struggling place. Like, what are some of the things you would say to me, like right out of the gate?
I would probably want to ask you a lot of things about your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Some habits that you've maybe have in your life or don't have in your life, and are they serving you or are they not? And I talk a lot about radical self-compassion and understanding that these are unprecedented circumstances.
Right.
And anything we do towards our body needs to be done in love, not out of shame. And learning how to adopt these behaviors are always going to come from a place of, okay, I want to be my best self. And I want to do so lovingly. And what would that require? Because sometimes we live in a culture that's like, go, go, go. And it's like, you got to run this many miles and you got to eat this many calories and you need to do this, this, and this. And it's almost kind of rigid. And if we were to treat a child like that in the middle of a pandemic, you think they'd thrive? Right. But yet people tend to do this to themselves. They have these expectations that they put on themselves that maybe sometimes are a bit too intense. And understanding like, hey, these are hard times. Like, it's okay to not get it perfectly right. So that's where that radical self-compassion aspect is a large part of the wellness plan of learning, okay, if I want to be healthy and I live a healthy life, that means gentleness, gentle nutrition, maybe gentle movement. Maybe if you are a go, go, go person, rest is maybe what's more in order. And so I oftentimes will ask a lot of questions and pinpoint, we try to pinpoint where should we put some focus. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like what you said a while ago was, learning to relate to your body in love, not shame. And last week we mentioned this when we were talking about mental health as well, that in Romans 12 Paul says to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. And so many times we view our bodies as something that we don't like, or something that isn't really who we are, something that we maybe like to escape. And yet he says, offer your body to God as a sacrifice. And the implication in that is that a body is a good thing, that your body is a good thing. And that's what we see in the beginning of Genesis too, where God creates human beings and says, very good.
Right.
Right. And sometimes we relate to our bodies firstly as bad and not good. But what I hear you saying is you start from a place of radical compassion.
Mm-hmm.
You start from a place of love and not shame.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where the foundation is. Is that what I heard you say to some
Right.
degree?
That is.
Okay.
I really have always believed, and I learned this in a parenting class actually
Okay.
from here.
Yeah, okay.
It was years ago.
Sure.
This would have been when we were brand spanking new here.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember their names, but they used to, I don't see them, well, it's been like a year since I've been here.
Was it
So
alpha parenting?
I can't ever remember. No, it wouldn't have been an alpha course because I don't even think it was alpha back then. This was like when Maya was still a baby. We still have my nephew living with us.
Okay.
And so we were, we should just get on this. We've got this young teenager with us and our 3 little kids. We should maybe learn some new parenting ideas. And the only thing I remember from it, and I still take away from it, is rules without relationship equal rebellion. And I think that our culture has created a lot of rules and no relationship with our body. And that we need to be in relationship with our body and understand that we are like in a physical body. We are a body, and like to experience it in its wholeness.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to outsource or disempower people from understanding, no, you and your body, you got to have a PhD on your own body, and it's unique to you, and it's masterpiece, and it's incredible and diverse and rich. And to me, every time I look at, I mean, the more I learn about bodies, the more I'm like, and there's more to discover and more to discover. And this is why I read too much, because I get obsessed with the human body. I think the human body is just such a cool, there's no other word. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Like of a great designer.
Yeah.
And to me, like, I get why, all different types of philosophies, but I cannot understand how you can't understand that there's a creator behind this all, like, or the detail.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah. And I mean, I love what you said earlier about recognizing that life is terminal.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways that's true. But in the Christian story, that's also not the end of the story. And when we talk about, forgive me for getting super pastory just for a moment. Can I do that? But, we talk about Jesus and his resurrected body. Like Jesus came back with a physical body. And, we're here in the New Testament that actually that he's the firstborn of the dead. So there's a sense of actually we are going to come back, and in the new creation, we will have physical bodies. They'll be different from our bodies now. That's what we read in Scripture. But they will still be physical to some degree. They'll simply be in a restored nature where creation is actually been completely restored from its challenges with the fall and our challenges physically with the fall. So this sense of wonder of the body and appreciation of the body and a recognition of the beauty of the body and how God's made the body. Bodies and physicality matter from a Christian perspective, isn't going anywhere. There's a brokenness to the world that we live in, but God's restoring and redeeming that. And that's ultimately what the death and resurrection of Jesus kind of means in the center of the Christian story. So when I hear you say that about your fascination and love and appreciation of the body, like, I think in many ways heaven will be about like discovering even more what's so fantastic about heaven and earth in redeemed, renewed, restored bodies where there won't be any death. I think that's incredibly beautiful idea. And we have no idea what that will look like, but it's really fun to speculate. Like, what will hiking look like when heaven and earth come together and when Jesus returns, right?
And I've thought about this, the whole body thing, and like heaven on earth sort of scenario. I've thought about, wouldn't it be interesting if our bodies, when our new bodies are given to us, are actually the bodies we already have, only that what's lifted are all the ideologies and thoughts and beliefs that we've adopted about ourselves that are actually not true.
Yeah.
And so we see our today body with those lenses that are lifted. And you're like, whoa. And we're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm a bombshell. Like, it's amazing, right?
Exactly.
I'm like, and I think we're just going to be like, like this.
I am fearfully and wonderfully made.
Right. We're made in the image of God, right?
Yeah.
And so that's pretty powerful when you think about, whoa, that's like, to me, there's no words to express. Like, I think we haven't even I feel like my Spanish is coming. Begin or
Just
began?
go Spanish.
Began.
Ricky will translate.
I don't even think we began. No. Anyways, if it's wrong English, forgive me. But I don't even think we can begin. There we go. To understand how great these bodies are.
Yeah.
They're fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a front row seat to watching a little creature discover her body right now with our 15-month-old. And what's great right now is that she's just still in this stage of like, everything about me is fantastic.
Right.
Like the other day I caught her in front of the mirror just blowing kisses to herself, going,
Right.
nah, nah. Just watching her, like, look, I can stretch, I can shout, I can scream,
Right.
just like enjoying who she was.
Right.
And it wasn't self-worship. She's like delighting in the creation that she is, because she knows she's loved and she's cared for. And we so often don't relate that way in front of a mirror.
Right. And I think talking, you know how you were saying, she's not, like, you were talking a little bit about, I guess, conceit. Like some people think like that would name that conceit or whatever.
Sure.
We've been shamed out of loving our bodies.
Right.
And I was having this conversation with my son one day. We were walking and we were talking about the difference between being conceited and arrogant versus confidence.
Right.
And how you could tell the difference.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know, conceit and confidence is actually coming from a place of not loving yourself, where confidence is coming from a place of, I really love myself. And because I love myself, I'm not better than or less than anybody else. And so therefore, this person can be just as great as I am.
Yeah.
And just as great
There's
as
no
I can be, just as great as they are, right?
Yeah.
There isn't, right? And so there's this interesting thing in our culture that likes, if you love yourself, to be labeled as conceited or arrogant or, you know, vain. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. There's a connection there.
Yeah. I think maybe we just don't believe there's enough love to go around. And again, that's why I come back to the story of the gospel and go, there's plenty to go around. That's the whole point of it, of the table of abundance. That's the whole point of God's generous love. There's enough to go around, and more so, right? So I'd love to get into, like, we kind of had a little bit of back and forth on email and some questions about stuff we would like to touch on. And you talked about when it comes to relating to our bodies in the pandemic, you talked about something called the 20-20-20 focus. Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Right. And
because in my free session of wellness coaching that I get,
I call it the 20-20-20. It's not my creation. This is
1995, MonicaRosenke.com.
I don't know who created it. I remember reading it in one of my 10,000 books I read a million times ago.
Yeah.
But move, reflect, and grow are practice that I move.
We don't have a screen right now, so I'm gonna make it really obvious.
Move is in physical movement, because we're talking physical health, but we were talking earlier, you can really apply this in any area.
Yeah.
But movement, reflection, and growth.
So
and yes, some people like to do, the person who had taught this, the book that I had read was like movement first and this second, this third. Genuinely, I don't do it in that order, but I do these 3 things every single morning. And so movement, 20 minutes of movement, or it doesn't have to be 20 minutes. I don't have the rigidness of the timeline, but if you're someone that's like, I want to spend 1 hour a day just doing something for me physically, 20 minutes of movement, 20 minutes of growth, 20 minutes of reflection, or whatever, reflect, grow. The order is movement, reflection, and grow. I don't do it in that way. I actually wake up and do reflection first thing, movement second thing, and then I do my growing third thing.
What do those look like for you? Can you give us an example of move, reflect, grow, or reflect, grow, move? Or
So I usually wake up, I'm a 5 a.m. person.
Okay.
I do that Monday to Friday, whether I work or not. Weekends, I don't. I don't move, reflect, and grow. I do.
Weekends, you're a 2 p.m. person.
I'm like way later, and I'm still an early riser, but I don't have like a schedule sort of thing. But I'm a 5 a.m.er. I reflect. So to me, that looks different every single morning. It can be I'm having coffee in silence and just inviting God to sit with me. Or it could be that I'm journaling. I am a big, I do gratitude journaling quite a bit. I also sometimes will listen to worship music or regular music. I don't listen to a lot of worship music. I definitely struggle with some Christian musicians. It sounds a little the same. Anywho, and I have a problem with the name. Why do they call it Christian music?
I don't know.
Christian cooking, Christian
You
I
guys,
don't know.
you guys don't do all Christian cooking at home?
No.
I'm actually quite concerned now.
No. Or I wouldn't call myself a Christian personal trainer. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a funny thing to
It's
me
true.
that we do that with music. It's such an awesome art piece. And
Mhm.
I don't know. So I'll do musitations, and
Mhm.
that is using the beat of music to meditate.
Mhm.
So find a song and be like, for 4 beats, I'll inhale, I'll hold for 4 beats, I'll
Mhm.
exhale for 4 beats, I'll
Mhm.
inhale, and then repeat the cycle. Like
Mhm.
inhale, hold, exhale, hold,
Mhm.
and I'll do that. Sometimes it's prayer. Most of my praying happens when I'm moving, actually,
Mhm.
which is different. I'm not the best at praying completely still.
Mhm.
I'm better at listening when I'm completely still, which is
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
So I guess that's another way of praying. Still praying.
Some would say that
Yeah.
the most majority of real prayer is listening. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So that's what my reflections look like.
Mm.
And then I move. So that's normally, it's pretty easy for me to do because of my job.
Mhm.
So I can either do that with people. And right now, since COVID, that's pretty much what I'm doing for my morning movement, which is
Mhm.
with people. But it's just getting those endorphins going, getting the serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine in your brain going,
Mhm.
neurogenesis, all of that stuff is
Yeah.
like what happens in our body physiologically, as well as like
Mhm.
waking up the heart and the lungs. And just, I feel it's another form of worship as well. I
Mm.
know that moving is a privilege for
Mhm.
many. I've been sick at times when I can't move.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a joyful way of moving as well. And I also, I'm a big believer in movement isn't something that's like really rigid.
Yeah.
I'm about listening to our body. So some
Right.
days the movement's going to be much more fluid, and maybe my body's saying, hey, you know what, you're really physically tired. Maybe
Mhm.
walking today is what you need to do.
Right.
Sometimes my moving is like, I've got energy.
Yeah.
And oftentimes my emotion will match my movement.
Mm.
So if I'm like really pissed off, I want to
Mhm.
I have a punching bag, I'm going to box.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm going to climb a mountain. Sometimes it's going to be, I just need to breathe and contemplate and connect with nature and walk or hike. And
Yeah.
so movement is a huge part. But I do the 20-minute movement thing pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Because of my job, it really allows that. But I'm not
Sure.
rigid about it. It's just,
Right.
it's kind of like, you probably read your Bible a whole lot more than I do. You probably do. You're a pastor. You're like reading, right? Your I mean,
Don't put it past yourself.
I don't, anyways, well, so that's what the movement part is. And the grow part is, this is where my reading comes in for me.
Yeah.
Or I listen to podcasts.
Mhm.
That's another thing. Or documentaries.
Yeah.
But I like to learn other ideas.
Mhm.
Sometimes ideas that completely or totally different than mine and stretch me, like in my
Yeah.
thinking, or challenge some thoughts.
Yeah.
And sometimes the growing part can be inward reflection as well. So that's where the reflection comes from. But then it's like, okay, what can I?
How do these interconnect with each
Right.
other? Yeah.
Right.
There's
So
probably days where they all feel, to some degree, you're doing 3 very different things. There's other days where you're like, wow, this is all really showing me that I'm kind of working through this one thing that I had in my head or my heart for the last week, and it's all coming to fruition on this day.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems very separate, and
Yeah.
sometimes all mushes together.
Yeah. So have you ever talked with someone about the 2020 and they go, I don't know how to do 2020? Do you know people that do like 555, like things like that, or like
Yeah,
in
I
terms
think
of accessing that as a rhythm for their morning? Because
right.
I'd imagine for some people, like that shift into 2020 would be a big shift for some to go from 0 to 60 on that.
Right. And I'm an AM person, but my husband, who's here, you
Right.
guys can't see him, but he's here. He's a PM person.
Right.
Like, he's a night owl. I'm an early riser.
Mm.
He wakes up early because of work, but it's
Mhm.
not his prime time. For me,
Mhm.
mornings are my prime time. So I'm not rigid when people are asking me about, like, do I have to do 2020? And I'm like, no. Let's
Yeah.
implement
5 a.m. If you're not doing it this way,
right.
not doing it the right
Not
way.
at all. Not at all. And
Yeah.
I certainly was not this way when I had little kids.
Right.
Right.
Really?
And
That's surprising
this
to me.
changes. I think that people think that you have to be like, wake up, and I want to be just like trainer Monica, and I want to be like up at 5. No. Like, look at your life
That was
and
not
honor
Monica with 3
you.
kids under
Right.
6. Yeah.
Right. And honor where you are at in your life in this very moment.
Yes.
And so, right now, my kids are pretty self-sufficient. You know, it's a very different place. I get full nights of sleep. I know, I'm sorry for those of you with young kids. And I also had good sleepers, but I mean, every family looks different and every person looks different. And I think because I try to teach that health comes from a place of love, not shame. That means loving who you are, how you've been created, and listening to your body and what your needs are, and looking at your life and saying, okay, what would work? So I'd say adopt one thing at a time. I think too many people try to eat the whole elephant at once instead of just like one, bite-sized chunk at a time. And really celebrate the wins. We tend to have that negative Nelly in our brain, and learning to turn it down or off. I call that negative Nelly the beast, like tame the beast and train the lion. So that inner, when you're like, oh, you're doing so good, like learning to like, that inward dialogue and just being like, you're doing great, you've got this, keep it up. Being like, okay, well, you failed, that's okay, up you go, try again. Right.
And there's so much of the gospel in that, right? There's so much of that which we don't carry with us. It's like, well, no, I screwed up, I should have done better. It's like, okay, but you're not defined by that. When you never are.
Right.
I mean, that's directly even from Jesus when he relates to his disciples, and he says, hey, you're all gonna abandon me.
Right.
He says, but don't let your heart be troubled. Like it's not really on you anyway. Like it's not about your performance in this. You're loved beyond that.
Right.
So we also talked a little bit in our email about the body, mind, spirit connection, mindset, heart set, health set, soul set. Can you talk a little bit about kind of interdependence and interconnection? Because a lot of times we view ourselves as not just disembodied, but really disconnected. My soul's over here, my mind's over here. My mental health is this, my physical health is this. And how have you come to understand interconnection as a whole person?
The body, the mind, the spirit are beautifully and wondrously, amazingly braided together. There is no separating them. I think, like, I've come to that understanding personally from my story. Understanding, I think that's probably why I'm so well. And so because of that experience, I'm like, and then it was a physical, emotional, spiritual healing in all of its forms. And so when that happened to me, I'm like, there's more to the human body than just a body. Because I experienced it. And that was what piqued my curiosity of like, wait a second here. We're more than just skin and bone. And it's not like in this compartment, like what you're saying, in this compartment, and we'll address this. They ebb and flow. And, I think it's easier for us to kind of be like, tickety-boo like this, but it's definitely more fluid than that. And I mean, it's mysterious and wonderful and wondrous. What was your question? I got off. I
just said talk a little bit, and you did. You did exactly what I'm hoping to do here. I think, and I think it seems that like in some of your fields, people are speaking more about that, and they've come to that realization, and people are learning that through physiology and neuroscience and all this kind of research. But there's so many negative views of the body and views of our mind or our soul, and how those things are really all disconnected. And there's some great work out there from some great biblical scholars that are saying that's really not what Scripture says. And I referenced this book last week, and this is exactly what this scholar, Paula Gooder, is talking about. I showed you this earlier. He said, add this to your 13 book list that you're reading, because you would be all over this. But like, maybe you could share a little bit of your story of like what that, you talked about transformational grace, where there was even physical healing. Like what did that awakening look like for you to go, I'm not a segregated body, but I've experienced a holistic kind of healing, and that journey's unfolded for you. Can you share a bit about that?
Right. So 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with the liver tumor, but 20 years prior to that, I had a brain tumor. And my husband and I were just married. We've been married 21 years. So we were 6 months married when I was diagnosed with a massive brain tumor in my brain. And it was growing in my pituitary gland. And the doctors had said, you have about, 2.5 years left of sight. I was a teacher at the time, and elementary school teacher at the time. And I mean, this was crazy to be like, young person and told you're going blind. and then just recently married and all of this. So it was a really high peak of, just intensity in our life. And I was dealing with a lot of trauma from my childhood, which I had not addressed. And the way I had, I guess, survived those circumstances was overperformance.
Right.
And perfectionism. And so the brain tumor was the last straw to break the camel's back. And it was when I recognized I need help and I need to address, I was just not functioning in life, in any way, shape, or form. And I was trying to be that people pleaser. I think, unfortunately, the diet culture that we live in currently, and even back then, I just was developing, unhealthy behaviors that may have appeared to be healthy,
right,
and were even applauded by society,
right,
but none of those behaviors were healthy. I was dying inside. I was hurting inside. And so I went to seek help from a professional counselor.
Yeah.
And she had worked with me and Greg, my husband, and I, during this whole experience of facing the blindness. And we were prepared for blindness. We moved from Belcarra to Burnaby to live close to the CNIBC. Our whole life was we were preparing for me to be blind. And I was seeking counseling there, and then obviously addressing all the trauma from my childhood. And we had been together, I can't even remember how long I was seeing her now, probably a good, I saw her for a full year, but probably this was about month 10 when this happened. And I was seeing her twice a week. So that's pretty intense to go see someone twice a week, a counseling. That's a lot. But anyways, she had walked me through an experience that I was expressing and sharing what had happened in this trauma experience. And then she asked me, where's Jesus in my life? That was when everything changed for me. I experienced, I've never been able to share this without crying, ever. I think I've shared this part of my story 1,000 times. And still can't say
crying is a good and beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yep. But that was when I experienced the most radical grace I have ever experienced in my life, from the very tips of my hair to the ends of my toes. And it felt like I physically felt this. And I was not a Christian-y person. So this was just also the other thing. It was this is crazy, but I am feeling this and I want this. This is, and I just heard and felt one word. Well, it was you are enough. Enough. It was just enough, but it was you are enough. Enough to the trauma that was happening, enough to the sickness. It was just enough, but it was said in such a way that it meant so many things all at once. It was addressing me to my core. And my life just profoundly changed from that moment forward. Healing happened. My tumor completely shrunk. All the eating disorder and unhealthy behaviors, they didn't go away like that, but there was breakthrough and change, and it happened, and healing happened, and healing happened. And now I can say to you 21 years later, the things that I was enslaved to then, I'm freed from. And so that's for me what piqued my interest in, okay, so I experienced physical healing, emotional healing, and spiritual healing even, and just all at the same time. And it was very much, to me, I could feel at that moment, we're not one of those things, we're all of those things. And so from there, because I was a teacher, I had kines background. I was given a job to work at a gym. I could no longer work as a teacher because I did have some brain injury, and remembering too many things is challenging for me, still to this day. So I'm kind of Finding Nemo. It's the short-term stuff. People ask me things and I'll be like, what did I just say to you? Or this is why I find it's easier to do conversation than me have a written thing and be like, I don't remember what I wrote a minute ago. I'll have to remember it and put it in my hard drive, which is just too much effort. So anywho, I worked at a gym, and this was the other layer of the story behind it, where I was working for Just Ladies Fitness. I was just coming out of that diet culture, fat phobia, thin-centric beliefs, and now working in this gym. The people that were coming in, because I had a kines background, I was hired on as a trainer. The women that were coming in, didn't matter the age, between 18 years old to 80, would come into my office, wanting to change their bodies.
Mm.
But it was all about the exterior, not about the interior. And they were deeply oppressed by like the diet culture. I could see this. And they didn't know what I was experiencing. And they didn't know that I was facing blindness. And that then I was also met with this encounter of grace. And all I could see is these incredibly beautiful, diverse, vibrant women obsessing about their size. And to me, it was tragic. Because I was thinking, well, if I don't get to see, I wish I could see what my body will look like when I'm 80.
Right.
I wish I could see what my body will look like if I'm ever to have children.
Yeah.
I wish I could see, like, it was as though, like, so there's all of this happening all at the same time. So this is where my passion about, you know, becoming a body image activist came from, right? Because I could see the oppression that so many women, I was working in a women's gym. Now this is a men and women's problem, but I was working in a women's gym. So I was seeing it from a woman's perspective as well.
So having gone through that initial journey and that experience of like a powerful experience, and then coming to that realization with some of the women that you were working with, now kind of 20 years on, what's the stuff you feel you're now discovering about the interconnection between body, mind, soul, spirit, and how we are interconnected and fearfully and wonderfully made? What's exciting you now about the body, our bodies, and health?
Epigenetics.
Okay, what's epigenetics?
Epigenetics is a science of understanding our cells adapt and change and have memory.
Okay.
And I think that came from having the liver tumor. For me, I needed to have a liver transplant. There was no liver to match. But while we were waiting for the liver transplant, I had to meet with a psychologist and understanding that it's so different than what I had learned when I was in high school. We think that all memories are carried in our brain. That was what I was taught anyways when I was in high school. They now know that's not true. And transplants changed that science belief. And that happened because people would get livers or hearts or lungs or whatever organ, and all of a sudden have different memories that did not belong to them. And so they started to understand that our cells actually carry trauma, can carry memory, can carry. So to me, this is fascinating because it is also our physiological body can carry emotional trauma. We know that when you're stressed, your jaw might start clenching, or your neck, or your headache, or your gut. That's an example right there. If we are profoundly sad, we're like emotional beings, right? We're emotionality, physicality, spirituality, you know, physicality. So this is something that science really intrigues me, because I'm like, ooh, it's really talking to this.
It's intriguing, but it also feels like so like obvious at the same time. Like when someone's like, oh, I always break out when I'm stressed. It's like, yeah, because it's all connected. And yet somehow we still carry around this thing that like, well, I'm a soul and one day I'm going to be divorced from my body and I really want to get out of here. And I'm me, but me is not defined by my body. Where the scriptures would say, what I hear you saying is like, no, there is no you apart from your body.
Right.
Yeah. Is that
right.
what I hear you saying?
Yes. And this is, I think, maybe another reason why I'm super duper passionate about getting that message across, that our bodies are good. All bodies are good bodies. And this is where my resistance as a trainer is. And that's why I call myself a body image activist, because in the wellness industry, they've done a very poor job, actually, of resisting the culture. I mean, it's very marketable and easy to sell, you know, one size is the only acceptable size, but it's anti God's creation. I mean, it's just not how he did it. You and I could eat the exact same thing, do the exact same workout, and have the exact same 2020 workout plan, whatever 2020 life plan. We could do everything exactly the same. We're going to be uniquely and divinely different. And that's a good thing. And so if people, both men and women, could really grasp that and start adopting behaviors that are loving instead of, no, I need to look like that.
Right. Yeah.
Even words like, I need to get in shape. Well, what do you mean by get in shape?
Yeah. What shape are you trying to
What
become?
Are you talking about?
Are you a triangle? Are you
like
what? Yeah.
What is that? And so it's a hard message for people to hear, because it's a lot more of the inner work that we have to do.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be like, well, I'll just, eat salad and chicken every day and exercise, 3-4 days a week and count it's all out of the body telling us to, instead of working from inside out. But we are physicality as much as we are spirituality and emotionality and all of this.
Amen. It's interesting when you talked about the trauma that we can carry, in our bodies and stuff. One of the notes that this scholar makes is that when Jesus is resurrected, he comes back and not always recognizable. Seemingly his physical body can now do things that are different, like move through walls and things like that. We're like, okay, how does that work? But he comes back with crucifixion scars. He comes back with that's the moment with the disciples where he goes, put your hands here and my hands and put it in my side. So this question of like, what will our bodies be in the resurrection? We don't really know, but the fact that we cannot, like one of my friends says, we really have a hard time reckoning with our histories. I think sometimes we're trying to like disconnect ourselves from our bodies. And part of that is disconnecting ourselves from our histories.
Right.
Whereas like Jesus' story in his resurrected body is not disconnected from the story of his crucifixion.
Right.
And I wonder about but there's a redemption to it. And I wonder how we can think about that in terms of our own stories and our own bodies. I especially, I don't know, I think about people who have suffered really, really significant trauma and abuse, right? Of going, actually part of me wanting to flee my body is because of how my body was violated and the shame that I carry with that.
Right.
What does that look like for that person to come to a place of acceptance and love, out of God's acceptance and love for their body? I don't know if you had any comments on that, but that just came to mind as we were talking about trauma and bodies and story and history.
Right. Well, I think I certainly can relate to that. And so I know that when I was younger and hadn't addressed my trauma and hadn't healed from trauma, I certainly looked at other ways to cope and feel it's like I'm escaping my body, because my body kind of, in a way, felt like it betrayed me.
Right.
Does that make sense? And still, I mean, even with cancer, you can at moments have moments like my body is betraying me.
Yeah, I'm
like,
fighting against my body. It's
right.
my body that's
right. I would definitely. Well, sorry. Here's the Nemo brain. What happened? What was the question?
Just what do you think? How do we relate to our histories and our bodies like more healthily?
Yes. I think
if we've experienced trauma and stuff that like if we want to escape it. Let's talk about someone with cancer. And go like, how can I not hate my body right now?
Right.
How did you process that?
For me, spirituality is a huge, important thing. Like it's huge for me. So for me, with the liver was a very different experience from my brain.
Sure.
I mean, I really was at the very beginning, like, is there something here I need to learn? Is there something I missed? Like I was kind of like, but I really experienced God's healing. Like I know this.
Yeah.
And I remember crying out to God, and I'm very, I pray to God, like, I mean, I have no problem being like, I mean, my prayer was like pretty much F God, like I'm not gonna say that. I was like pretty mad.
Yeah.
And
I've prayed those prayers.
I felt him, like him, her, whatever you want to call our great creator. Just say it's not about you. And I was kind of like, it's not about me. Like, I think this is all about me. This is my liver.
I'm the center of the universe right now. Yeah.
Right. I'm like, it's my liver, right? And it's not about you. And I was kind of like, I still don't know what that means. But for me, I'm really okay with that. So the liver experience was sort of different, but I know that for me, and I still see a counselor on a regular, not like for trauma, not for the what happened with the brain tumor. This is just, I also, part of my self-care plan would probably be just that verbal dump, being able to just be like, this is what I'm thinking. And because I work as a trainer and I listen a lot as a trainer, sometimes it's just nice to have someone else listen, right? Sure. And also being a young person with a terminal disease is sometimes challenging in that it's not like something you can just bring up to anyone whenever, right? And it's, it can be a Debbie Downer for some people that are very uncomfortable with death. I'm very comfortable with death, but not everyone is.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks for sharing that, Monica. I appreciate it. So we're kind of coming towards probably the end of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've been talking, whenever I sit with people as a pastor or a coach, we discover stuff through the conversation. Stuff kind of rises to the top that we feel has been important in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as the Nemo brain's going on, right? So there's space for that. But what would you say today for people that might be listening that you feel in our conversation has kind of risen for the top for you as we've been talking?
I think right now during pandemic, the practice of radical self-compassion.
Radical self-compassion.
I don't even think it needs to be a pandemic. I just think if people were much more self-compassionate, it's amazing how much more compassion and acceptance and less judgmental we are to others.
Right.
I really think it begins with us.
Yeah.
And I see that with my children. I especially see that with my daughter, maybe because she ducklings me quite a lot more than my boys did. I mean, they do, but they tend to duckling Greg a lot more than me, especially now that they're older. But I see by being more compassionate to myself, she's understanding how to be compassionate to herself and to others as well.
Right.
And same for me.
Because you're modeling.
Right. It's modeling and it's loving.
Mm.
And it's not rigid and it's not hard and it's not mean. And it's, again, in relationship with your body.
Yeah.
Then when you're giving, it's not a rule so much anymore.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of like, okay, this is something I want to adopt because it's good for me and I love me. It's not because I have to be this way.
Yeah.
Right. It's away from that performative kind of stuff. It's coming from the heart.
Yeah.
It's like heart work. When you're, so that's something that's really coming out to me, is about the radical self-compassion and being gracious to ourselves. You're not going to get it all right.
Yeah.
That's okay.
And that's okay.
We live in this culture that's super like, you got to get it right. And kind of harsh. Do the hustle. And you're always like, go, go, go. And comparitis and stuffitis and uveitis and just like too much. And it's okay to like, just to be. Yeah. It's okay to be still. I think that's one thing the pandemic's allowing us to have, is a lot more time.
It's okay. Yeah.
Right.
So for someone who would say, I can't fathom discovering self-compassion. When we talk about self-compassion, I mean, you use that, in your terminology with all the kinds of people you speak to, but hearing your story and knowing your experience of grace and your experience of healing.
Right.
That doesn't come from Monica. Like, there's a sense of that comes from the Creator, that comes from God, as He's brought that. What would you say to someone who goes, I have a hard time relating to the Creator when it comes to compassion? What would you say to someone about your experience of God, of the Creator, when it comes to the compassion and the love and the grace of God?
I can really understand that, because I think before I was hit with this radical experience of grace in my life, I thought God was a mean God. I thought, I wanted nothing to do with Him, because for me, or her, whatever, I have a hard time calling our Creator Him, but
sure. Fair enough.
Her. I really feel that I can resonate with that person that may be really struggling with, how do I even believe in a Creator who's compassionate? Yeah. Because I thought God was mean, harsh, rules. Yeah. And this is why I believe, as believers, we need to really exemplify radical self-compassion, because then it's okay if you F up. It's okay if you don't always get it right. And you can get up and dust yourself off and know you're loved and know your worth and know you're enough. And then you move onwards. It's not like, get your act together and get with the program. It's not that mean voice. That's not of God. Yeah. And I would say, get curious. I think all human beings in their heart of hearts can understand and see love. We know it, we feel it, and we're like, that was good, like that's good. And we also know and see when it's not love. We have this like ability to be, that's evil, or whatever you want to call it, that's mean, it's not kind, it's hate. And I think that in our being, we know that there is love. And so I'm kind of going to getting off track here.
Be curious about that love. I heard you
right,
say
be
curious.
curious
Like,
about that
maybe
love.
maybe God is not what I've supposed God to be. Maybe
Right.
there's more to God, and maybe I can follow that curiosity of love and compassion.
Right.
Where does that lead me?
And I understand if people think that, because I think that there has been a lot of that. And I mean, I think Christian churches really need to take ownership of this too, of being like, yeah, you know, we need to own that. Like, we have not always represented love. We've done it wrong and often. And so understanding that we need to be sorry, move forward. And there's grace for us as believers, as Christians, but it's also room for allowing people to discover and be curious and to heal. And healing doesn't always look pretty. That's another thing I would say. I mean, my healing journey was not a pretty experience. That sounds really pretty to have this moment of like grace. But like there was some really ugly moments there too. Right. So I gave you guys the Cole's notes of it, but right, that's healing, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental. It's not always pretty. There's scabs and wounds and gunk. I have some pretty big scars, and the healing process doesn't always look pretty. So I'd also say that is if someone's trying to figure out radical self-compassion, is understanding that it's not always going to look pretty.
And growth isn't always pretty too. It takes time. Something I've always said, probably wasn't the first to say it, but what came to mind when I was realizing my own growth in certain areas was most of the time God is not a microwave. Most of the time God is a slow cooker. And so we place ourselves in God's hands, and that's going to be a long, loving, sometimes painful, but a growing and a healthy journey. Monica, Greg, thank you for spending your evening here. It's a sacrifice. You got kids, you got other stuff you could be doing, but we said when we first saw each other, it's nice to see each other after a number of months, and
it's
actually
been a long time
in the flesh. So how appropriate to talk about flesh and bodies and actually do this together. So it would feel weird and odd to do that not when we can at least be physically together, even if we all can't. So thank you for tonight and for being open and honest and sharing. And just really want to say bless you as you serve in our community. Thanks. I'm so thankful for Christians like yourself who have a deep understanding of the gospel and the love of Jesus, and translate that in so many areas in which organized religion can't and isn't in those places. But in many ways, that's what the church is. The church is a body that is all over the place and expressing itself in different ways. And so thank you for being the body part that you are and bringing what you do into our society. And thank you for how you've blessed our church and so many people in our church, even with how you've loved and shown compassion and grace and exemplified health with your body.
Well, you're welcome. And likewise. I mean, thank you guys. Our church community has certainly been unbelievably supportive, loving, and encouraging and helpful, especially during some of our really hard times.
Right on. Well, thanks again, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. You can always find other Grow Talks on our page here, and we also just want to let you know that in a couple weeks we're going to be returning with Grow, not next Thursday, but the Thursday after, and we're going to be sitting down with Luke Dandran from the Kwantlen Nation. If you've tracked with Grow before, you'll know that we had a great conversation with Luke called "We Are Kwantlen." Learning to get to know our neighbors. And Luke shared a lot about Kwantlen history and tradition. And we're going on a longer journey with Luke throughout the course of the rest of the year, where we're actually going to look at Kwantlen's 7 traditional laws. And we're going to start with the tradition of generations. And so Luke's going to be joining us, and we're going to talk about generations and what it means to be in a community that honors all generations. So I invite you to that. You can find information on our website about it. And we hope you can join us then and in other ways that we connect in the life of the church in the middle of a pandemic. But thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope to see you around soon. We'll see you later.
Cheers.
Yeah.